Summarize
You
what
ready
it
to
is.
start?
Okay. Well, is everyone here?
Yeah.
Are we, okay.
Okay, yeah.
So should I do my little title page?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Okay.
good. Hello everyone. This is the family tree gathering for the Holbrook family, October 19th, 2014. I'm Caleb Cranny, and this is Grandpa Dean and Grandma Elaine. We're going to be interviewing Grandpa today about his life. We've previously printed out quite a few questions, 150 questions, and he's gone over them. He's gonna answer a few of them for us right now.
Okay. All right. Well, we start out, and they started out wanting to know what my full name was. It's Dean Webster Holbrook. The Webster comes from my mother's name, Norma Webster, and she grew up in Cedar City, and then of course the Holbrook comes from the surname of my father. So did I ever have a nickname in my life? Yes, I did. My father taught at the Davis High School, and there was one class of boys up there that nicknamed him Steamboat Bill. And so to them, I was Little Steamboat.
That's good.
And I was known as Little Steamboat for 3 years till I graduated. And anyway, that was my only other nickname that I've had. So I was born at the St. Mark's Hospital in Salt Lake, and there was a young lady there that had been born during the same 2 weeks that I was there, and I ended up marrying her. So we both got about the same beginning. I grew up in Bountiful. Bountiful is a little town of a couple of thousand people. It was a farming community, but it was a great place to grow up and live. And we played in orchards. We played around streams. We got to and in the winter time, the ponds in West Bountiful, which no longer exist, all froze over, and they were skating rinks for the whole area. So we would take tires down, burn them, and go ice skating down there all during the winter months, and it was a lot of fun. The religion of my parents and grandparents was both LDS. Their history goes back to the beginnings of the church. So we, of course, belong to the church here. And my first home, the first home that after I was born, we just lived in a short time, because the home that I really remember was under construction at that time. And so they just lived in a little home on 4th North, west of 4th East, which is now long gone, but and we only lived there for a short time. So the only home I remember is 134 East 1st South, because that was where I grew up, and so on. As far as my sister is 4.5 years younger than I am, and they're just the two of us. And I still remember when she was born, so I would have been about 4.5, but I still remember that very vividly, because I went over and slept overnight at my grandparents' home, which was just across the street, while she was being born. And
Which grandparents?
Oh, which grandparents? And do you want to shoot when he talks about his grandparents' home? That's it right there.
Oh, yeah.
Which grandparents' home were you at?
right across the street, the picture of it's on the wall. but it's on First South and First East, right on the corner. Still exists. It still exists, except there has been a addition put on the back of it.
William Holbrook's home.
Yeah, it was.
Grandpa Holbrook's
Yeah,
parents.
Grandpa. Yeah, it
Is that
was
the one
my
that's the
grandparents'
restaurant
home.
now?
No.
My
Oh,
grandparents'
that one's
home.
on the spot.
Uh-huh. Growing up was fun here in Bountiful, being a small community, and there were three of us that would kind of get together and play each day. One was Taylor Swenson, who's now deceased, but he lived just west of the Stoker School, but on First South. And the other was Hal Curtis, which was a cousin of mine. But they lived for quite a while over at my grandparents' home. And then they did move down onto Main Street and about 3rd South. But we would always get together early in the morning. We'd be gone all day. Some days we'd take a lunch. Parents wouldn't see us till night. Most of the time we strapped on a 6-shooter. And we played cowboys and Indians a lot of those early years. The books that I like to read, I like to read kind of adventure stories, but the set of books that I really enjoyed and read 3 or 4 times was by, and I still remember the name of the author, was Albert Payson Terhune, and a whole set of books that was called The Story of a Dog. And one volume was on a police dog, one was on a army dog, one was on a sheep dog, one was on all kinds of dogs, and there were about 8 volumes to that. And I think as a boy growing up, that was by far the most favorite book that we had. Now, childhood games, of course, were far different back then. We would play we would play hide and seek all the time, because Bountiful, you know, we could take a whole block and say you can hide anywhere in this block, and it was just a fun thing to do. And then also we did what we called adventure trips, and there we would just maybe climb up in the mountains a little ways. There was an old laundry down on Main Street in Bountiful, which was no longer in existence. But that one building was a great place for hide and seek, because it had so many possibilities to it, and so we loved that. Childhood games, we played a lot of board games. Those board games no longer exist, except Tiddlywinks and a few, but they've all changed now.
What board games were they? Maybe some of the ones that don't necessarily exist anymore, but
Well, there was a game.
Pollyanna.
What?
Pollyanna was one.
Pollyanna. That was a game. There was a game that was a detective game,
okay.
where if you made the right moves, you could solve the case. But a lot of times you never got it solved. There were a lot of games like that that no longer exist today. But a grade school, of course, was just a half a block away, so that was easy to get to, and I would go home to lunch each day. And I might say that the Stoker School in Bountiful was the first school, I think, I don't know in the state of Utah, but maybe the whole nation, that had a lunch program for the disadvantaged children. And one thing they did is in the spring, you would collect vegetables and things, and you would bring them in. And the room that got the most vegetables and all got a free road bus trip to Salt Lake for one day.
Where did you go?
We'd go to the zoo, we'd go to the state capitol, we'd go to Liberty Park, but I was in the class that won it every year. And the reason being is Elaine's father was in the produce business, and he would give them 100 pounds of potatoes, and that put us over the top every time.
I have a question. Did Elaine play in the neighborhood games, or were you?
No, that was just boys.
Not close enough
No
for him?
girls
Oh, I
involved.
see. Segregated.
But we went to grade school at the Stoker School, and it was a fun school to go to, and we would have Christmas pageants and all kinds of things like they used to do in the older days. But also for the boys, they would have a baseball program for the sixth graders. And we would play West Bountiful and South Bountiful and Centerville and Woods Cross, so that was our athletic program for the year in grade school. Of course, high school, and then we would go to the junior high, of course, which is still here on 4th North and west of Main Street, and. But then we would go to the Davis High School in Kaysville when it was time for high school. And we would catch the bus down on the corner of Center Street and Main Street. I'd walk down there. Elaine would have to walk over there. But the bus would pick us up there and take us to school. And then they would, after school, the buses would all come home, except they had what they called the activity buses. And if you, in high school, if you played football or if you were on the tennis team or anything that kept you after school, and there were some school clubs which would meet after school, then you'd come home on the activity bus, and you'd get home about 6 o'clock. So that's kind of, high school was a fun time for us, because one of the reasons is there was only one high school in the whole county. And so we met children from all over the county, went to school with them, and made lifelong friends, which now does not exist with the way that the school system is now. School, I always liked to go to school. I like the association with the friends and all, and I like learning things too. My favorite subject in school, I liked mathematics, and I liked English. I liked English and mathematics. I think those two were my favorites. And about grades, I was about a B+ student, somewhere along there. Once in a while I'd get an A and so on. School activities, I was on the tennis team. That was my activity is in the sports area. I went out for the basketball team, and I got down to they could have 10 players, and there were 13 of us. There were 13 of us left on the roster, and I was one of the 3 that got dropped. So, so I played M-men ball from then on. Any special awards? We always got a little folder at the end of the school year, which was leather, and it was very nicely done, and it told the activities. Of course, the only one I had was tennis, but still got that. And in that I lettered in tennis, then you could were endorsed into the D-men's club, which are any athlete who had gotten their letter up there. How old was I when I started dating? Well, I'll tell you. When I was a explorer scout, so I would have been 16 or 17. The scout leader said, we're going to have a party at my house, and all bring a girl. And I, as far as I can remember back, I think that was the first date that I really went on. And anyway, I asked Elaine to come. So she came, and my mother wrote a little, sometime I'll have to get it out so you can read it. My mother wrote a little paragraph about, because we lived right across the street from the school, or the scoutmaster, and she wrote a paragraph up about Elaine and I coming to the party. So anyway, that was my first date, and the second date I was on the 9th grade basketball team at the junior high, and at the end of the season, they said, "Well, you all get it. You can all. We're going down and play." It was a team in Sugar House, and then afterwards we'll all go out and eat, and you can all bring a girlfriend, and I took Elaine to that. So.
Hey, question. What's a team in Sugar House? I don't actually know what that is.
Basketball.
Sugar
team.
Oh, it's a basketball
Sugar
team.
House.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Sugar
Team
House.
Sugar House.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
That's a
gotcha.
part of Salt Lake.
Okay, sorry. My apologies.
So we did that, and then I might say too, we kind of got put together again, because when in the 9th grade class, they had two speakers, one boy and one girl, and I was the boy and she was the girl. So it seems like when we started out in the hospital together, we were going to be together quite a bit.
Is that way?
Well, anyway, then after high school, we started college and went a couple of years, and then we decided to get married. And it says, describe your wedding proposal. Now, today you do things so much different. I was taking her home one night, and it was the summertime, and we stopped and bought a milk nickel. Now, a milk nickel was ice cream on a stick. And we sat on her lawn eating these milk nickels, and that's when I proposed to her.
Was it a surprise?
So it wasn't quite as fancy as they do it today, but it's held up good. We got married.
Real quick.
Did you give her a ring then?
No, didn't have a ring, no.
Grandma, was that a surprise?
No.
You knew it was coming. Huh?
Yeah.
Alrighty.
She didn't say I'll think it over either. So we got married in 1948, and the wedding was in the Salt Lake Temple, but then you went to you did everything in one day. It isn't like today. You went down in the morning, you got your little lectures and all that. You went through the temple, you got married, you came home, and then got ready and had a reception. And the reception was at Elaine's home, and Frida Evans, a large Swedish lady, but a great cook. She had charge of the meal for that night. But what happened was that June 23rd turned out to be one of the coldest, rainiest days in the history of Bountiful, I think.
It was supposed to be an outdoor wedding.
And it was supposed to be an outside wedding. So they had to move everything inside, move furniture, do this and do that, so it'd be ready for the reception that night. Says, how long have we been married?
Wait, so was the reception inside your house then?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Mom had to wash walls on her wedding day, is that not true? Mom, they went home and decided at the last minute they had to move it indoors, and Mom always told me she had to wash the walls on her wedding day.
Well, it was the walls on the stairway down because we had to serve in the 2 bedrooms downstairs.
Oh,
Where did you go on your honeymoon?
Our honeymoon, we went to southern Utah down to the canyons. And it was a slow trip because during the war, the speed limit was 35 miles an hour. During the war years, it was 35 miles an hour. And when we got married in 48, that had never been removed yet. The reason being that the tire factories, all these things that were converted to war use, were just getting back in production and everything, and the new cars were just starting to come out, and and things. So they had never really never removed the 35-mile speed limit. So we went to southern Utah back 35 miles an hour.
So it was 1949 when you got back? What kind of car did you have?
We had a 1937 Shiv, because that's what my dad had, and of course he didn't have another car after the war yet, and so we went down in the 37 Shiv to the canyons in southern Utah. Well, anyway, let's see, how long have we been married? 66 years. So we think it's going to hold. Children, you all know we had 4 children, and we hope that the names that we gave them are satisfactory. We decided to have the children, and we decided to have them about 3 years apart, and so we had Christine, and then we decided now 3 years, and somehow Julene just dallied up there, and took 5 years for her to come down, but then the other 2 were 3 years apart.
Boys been very cooperative.
Yes, I know. Good. Passive aggressive one.
Well, let's see. If you had to do it all over again, would you raise your family a little differently? I really don't know whether we would have or not. We tried to be just directive enough to keep them out of trouble, but give them the latitude to learn on their own both, and they all turned out so good that I don't know why we'd change anything. So did we spoil any children? Well, maybe each of them. Did we treat each child differently? Yes, we did. They were all very different, and so we had to approach a lot of things differently with each one.
How so?
Well, some of them, one of them might take criticism all right, and the other three not.
Yeah, we want names now.
It was just different things.
Just different.
Some of them were easier to get to study. Some of them were easier to get the help in the kitchen, you know.
Right.
So, but they all had their differences, but that's okay. Their strong points made up for it.
You can tell about Julian and spaghetti.
Oh, yes. I'll have to tell you that because that's been used clear across the country, that story. Julene, when she was little, and
I was in the hospital when
she was in the hospital with Lisa. I got Julene up for breakfast. And I said, okay, Julene, now I can fix you an egg. We've got cereal. We've got this and we've got that. And I says, what would you like? What would you like me to fix you? She says, spaghetti. So we had spaghetti for
No,
breakfast.
you said you only have spaghetti for lunch.
He did.
Yeah, I told her you only have spaghetti for lunch. And, oh, that's right. That's part of the story I left out. I said, we only have spaghetti for lunch. And she says, let's have lunch. And she's only 3 years old and just, getting the best of me. So,
You guys did have the spaghetti then in the end. Okay.
okay, do I remember my grandparents? I remember my grandparents very well, except my grandmother on my mother's side died when my mother was just 2 years old. And my grandfather never remarried. So, and he lived into his 80s, but he lived the rest of his life just bringing up his family, and he never did remarry. So, who is the oldest person I remember as a child? I think my grandfather Holbrook was the oldest person I really remember, because he lived across the street, and I spent a lot of time over there, and I just remember him really well. And I've never been in any accidents. Surgeries have been minor, so I've been lucky that way. Do I remember politics and history and that discussed at the table? Yes, very much so, because my father was a history teacher, and so a lot of discussions were around the table would be centered on that. What about U.S. presidents? Which one which do you admire the most? The one I admire really the most of while I've been alive is Ronald Reagan. I thought he was a great president, a great leader. He could get people together, and I just thought he was a great president.
What's the earliest president you remember?
The what?
Earliest president you remember?
Well, I remember Roosevelt very well. FDR. I was a little too young for Hoover, I guess. But FDR I remember very well. And in fact, it says, either one of the questions here is, what did you think of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. I didn't like a lot of the things he did. Some things that he did, I think had to be done, and he went ahead and did them. But some of the things he did as a stopgap measure we still carry today, which I think is too bad. But World War II, how did that affect me? I was in school all that time, and so the effect on me was just as far as the rationing, things like that, you know. But my father, we had a family farm. We had a family farm, and my father was a school teacher, but he would work on, I think it was Wednesday night, but always on Saturday. He would work for the O.P. Skaggs at the O.P. Skaggs store down here, and checker and everything. And he would always bring home his paycheck and groceries. We never went for want of food. When I was 4 years old, the owner of the store asked him to go to Brigham City and manage the store up there for 3 months while he was off school. And so we lived in a little apartment up there for 3 months in Brigham City while he managed the store up there. Well, I think we get well, after Elaine and I got married, of course, I worked on the farm a little. My father was in the real estate business, and one day he asked me on the side, he and a couple of other people opened a real estate company, and Dad was a partner, even though he was a school teacher, and one day he said to me, he said, you know, I'm going to take a class up to the University of Utah. It's a night class, and it's put on by the National Appraisal Institute, and I'd like to go take that. And at that time, I was working as an insurance examiner for a company that handled all the insurances that went through Utah. And I said, well, I'll be glad to go up there with you. Sounds kind of interesting. I said, that kind of fits in a little bit with insurance. So I said, I'll go up with you. Well, I went up and I loved it. I loved that class. So I told Dad, I said, that's what I really want to do, is I want to become a real estate appraiser. So we were married, and a class came up in California. It was at Stanford University. It was in the summertime. And I told Elaine, I said, I'd like to go down and take that. And so I did. I and a kid from Salt Lake, a fellow from Salt Lake, we went down together and took that class down at Stanford University. And what you went was, you went 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 2 weeks. So you had 80 classroom hours over a 2-week period. Took your examination and came home. That one went okay. Then I decided that that's what I really wanted to do, and so I started to get into it. took another class at Utah State University on rural appraising and so on. Same thing up there, 2 weeks, 8 hours a day. So I took that one up there.
Running short now. Got it.
Okay.
No, no, keep
No,
going.
we're doing good. We're doing good.
It's doing fine.
Don't go
And,
short, go Dad.
And that kind of got me set up to go into that business. There were other classes that I took and so on, but those were the major ones you had to take. And there were centers on different types of business and so on. So anyway, we were in it. We had a real estate company here that had to go out of business, and I was doing some appraising in that. And went down and worked at, after that closed, was with First Security Bank for a short while. Then I really wanted to get into the full brunt of appraising because everything else had been kind of, even with a mortgage company, it had been all residential, and I really wanted to get in the full-fledged appraisal business. So I put in an application at the Western Savings and Loan in Salt Lake. And I got through the first cut of people, and then I got a phone call from the secretary down there, and she said, Mr. Frank, his name was Alan Frank, I can still remember his name, would like to have you come in and meet with him. And I thought, wow, I've got the job. And so I went in to meet with him, and he said, well, let me tell you right off, I really don't know why you're here. He says, but I was prompted to have you come in rather than send you a letter. He says, and I want to tell you right off that you have not been chosen. But he said, your qualifications are good, and he said, your experience is very limited in that because it's been hard to get into it and all. But he said, you've had a lot of residential experience, but he said, you're really equipped for better than that. And he says, the reason I'm not choosing you is because as soon as another opportunity came up to get into the full area of appraising, you'd leave me. And so then he said, let me tell you how to fill out your application for a job in this field. Anyway, he spent an hour and a half with me. That's the only time I ever saw him in my whole life. But he changed my life in that hour and a half. 2 weeks after that, a friend of mine, Bob Welch, many of you know Bob Welch, called me up and said he was with the Employment Services of Utah, and he said, we just have received a request going through here that the state of Utah, the highway department, needs an appraiser. They need somebody that's trained, can go to work immediately. You'd fit the bill if you'd be interested. And so I went down and I applied and I got the job. And so that was where I spent the next 30 years, was down there. And then just quickly down there, I started out as a fee appraiser. I kind of advanced to a review appraiser and then an appraisal supervisor, and I was kind of going up the ladder, and I got a phone call. I'd been there 12 years. I started in 63 and this would have been 75. So 12 years, I've been in there 12 years, and the assistant chief of right-of-way died, was a Staley from Bountiful. He died. And so right after that, I got a phone call from downstairs, asked me to come down. I came down and they said, "We have chosen you to take Staley's place." Now, the chief of right-of-way was politically appointed. The assistant chief sort of ran the show. So at that point, I went in as assistant chief of the right-of-way section, and down the road a ways, the director of the Department of Transportation called me down and he said, "I know that a political appointee is put in as chief of right-of-way, but we got the person in that's been in there is now going out. Would you like to have a job?" And I said no, because as soon as the political climate changed, I'd be out of a job. I said, "I don't, I'm in here for the long haul." Well, about 7 years before I retired, the federal government came through and said, we're going to look at the Department of Transportation. So they looked at the Department of Transportation and said, "How come you've got a politically appointee, the head of the department? There are only 3 states in the nation that have that, and we're just trying to get it back to on a professional level." So the fellow that had been appointed had 1 year to go. So the governor said, "I'm going to leave him in for a year because I appointed him, and you know, I'll let him serve out his term, and then you take over." So for the last 7 years, while I was the chief of right-of-way, but when I became the chief of right-of-way and the political appointee was gone, the assistant's chief that I'd held all those years was abolished. They abolished the assistant chief of that. So that's kind of it. Elaine and I are, as far as work goes, in retirement, Elaine and I have enjoyed our time together, and we're looking forward to some more time yet. And I think most of you are familiar with our lives together the last few years. We've been on trips. We've done things to try and have the family together and do things as a family, and we still continue to do that. And once in a while we do like to break away ourselves, but still we like to do that. And I think with that, I'm through.
I want you to leave the camera there, but I want to say something on record.
Okay.
Okay, just for the record. So I work with Karen Kromanek. She's the administrative secretary of my department. She's married to Fred Kromanek, who Dad hired, actually, and Fred's now retired. But she told me a couple of months ago they had a family home evening where you talked about the person that influenced you the most in life or was a big influential change. And Fred told all of his family that it was Dad. So kind of when Dad's talking about the mentor that got him in working with the state, that he said, Fred said that Dad polished him. He showed him what to do, and he was always kind to him and honest and full of integrity, and he always wanted to live his life like Dad lived his life.
I'm glad you said that, Jane.
Nice tribute.
That's nice. It's nice to know.
Well, it's nice to be sitting at work and have somebody just come tell you that story about your dad, too.
That's fun.
Alrighty.
Okay, now put it on, Caleb.
Okay. Well, that wraps up the interview. Thanks for watching, and we'll be doing this again next month for Grandma Elaine.
Is there more on his list, or did he get through
Yeah,
all
that
of
Did
it?
you
wasn't
get through it all?
150 questions.
What?
How far did we get through the
I think he
list?
skipped.
Oh, I've
Check
covered,
the
I've covered the whole gamut, but I've kind of summarized a lot of it, you know.
Okay.
If I answered every question, we'd have to bed you down so I could finish tomorrow.
That would be okay.
Pretty fun.
I'm
Alrighty.
cool with that.
That was so